The one thing I want you to take away from this video is to think before you act. Please think before you act because 5 minutes can change your entire freaking life, man. Growing up as a kid, drugs, alcohol, it was just a normal thing for me. Violence, cops, hospitals, things like that. It was just second nature, and I thought it was just something normal for people to just encounter growing up on a day-to-day basis. As a kid, I remember growing up in Hawaii, and most times when people think of Hawaii, they think sun, sand, beaches, palm trees, fun. Nah, man, I grew up in a very dark, grimy place. It was the projects of Hawaii, and it was not fun. It was not fun. There was a lot of fights. We were getting bullied a lot by the locals out there, the Hawaiians. I hung around with a lot of Vietnamese, a lot of Asians, a lot of Filipinos, and we were just getting into constant fights with Hawaiians. And now that was a very stark contrast compared to how I grew up when I moved back to LA. So I lived in Hawaii when I was in seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, and then 10th grade, I came back to LA. And when I came back to LA, it was a whole different experience. There was a grip ton of Vietnamese out here, man. And that's who I hung around with. I hung out with a lot of the Vietnamese, hung around a lot of the Asians, and we all got along in some sense. At least the Vietnamese that I hung around with, we were very cool. All we wanted to do was just party. And yeah, there were the fights, but for the most part, we just looking to hang out and just be brothers. That was it. And I met this cool ass cat. His name was Ho. He went to a different high school than mine, but we had mutual friends and we all hung around with each other. And he was a very cool guy. He came from a very grounded family. He lived with his he was very tight with his family just like I was. And the way I grew up out here in LA, I thought it was normal, and I still think it's very cool to live this way. I grew up in a household with my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, my grandma. I was all of us. It was like 10, 12 of us in one household. And he grew up very similar, very close with his family. And we would get together and drink a lot. But there was this one night we he was at a party, and back then we didn't have cell phones, so he gave me a call on the house phone. He hit me up. He was like, "Yo, try, what's good, bro? You coming through? Come to the party?" And I told him, I was like, "Hey, man, I don't have a ride, bro. And it wasn't too far, but it was far enough where you needed a ride, some sense. I didn't want to take the bus. It was getting late. I didn't want to ask for a ride for anything like that. I knew how to drive, but unfortunately, I just didn't have a car. At the time, I was, I think, 15 or 16. I was still very young. And Ho was like, "Hey, don't even trip, bro. I'll come pick you up." And so I waited. I waited, waited, waited. And eventually I didn't go to the party. I just fell asleep that night, I think. But I remember the very next morning, I get a call from one of our friends. And he goes, "Hey, bro, Ho passed away." I was like, "What? What?" I was like, "Hold on. What do you mean Ho passed away?" So there was three of them. It was um, Ho, K, and someone else, man. I forgot. They ended up getting into a car and they were driving drunk. They couldn't handle the turn. They ended up just crashing and they all unfortunately passed away. And I tell you this story because just imagine if he had, the sense to just be like, "You know what, I'm faded. I can't I can't drive. I'm just gonna just chill." If he just sat back for a few minutes and really thought to himself, I don't know how intoxicated he was, but if he had the mind to think, "You know what, I'm not gonna drive," he'd probably still be here today, man. Rest in peace to my dog Ho. Really good friend. Lost him at a very young age. So the one thing I want you guys to do today is to just think before you act, because at any moment your life can change. You see it time and time again. People, they get they fist fight over the smallest things, and that fist fight could lead into something serious. So today, that's what I want you to do. If you ever get out of line with your emotions, or you're frustrated, or you're angry, or you're sad, before you act, please just take 5 minutes and think about what you're going to do next, because that decision can change your life.